Recording in progress.
Okay, let's admit all the people in. All right. All right, just to make sure, everyone on Zoom, do you see the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, good morning. Happy Friday. Happy November, right? November 7th already. We just got a couple more weeks before the holidays, Thanksgiving, and all that fun stuff. So, so awesome. All right, we're going to be discussing today mastering the art of working with investors. Okay. You know, investors are unique in itself. They're not your traditional buyers. Okay. So this is going to be a comprehensive training designed to really help develop you as a real estate professional and really to get the trusted investors to want to work with you and how you can navigate and advise individuals that are looking for opportunities. Because when you look at it from a psychological component, the strategies and the executions and the framework that converts opportunities with working with investors, it's a money machine, right? Because one, you have someone that is motivated, and sometimes there's no emotions of it. It's all about calculations. It's about numbers, and if the right property fits their criteria, they're going to be all over it, and they're going to want representation. Okay, so that's what's today's conversation. Not necessarily going to go through the purchase agreement, but more of a mindset as a real estate agent that you are and how to work with investors. So let me just move this up a little bit. Decoding the investor mindset, right? Investors are fundamental differences from home buyers. They don't make emotional decisions on, countertops, paint colors, and all that. They look at it from a strategy point of view. Is if the property is good and there's potential to make income out of this or profit, they're going to go all in and submit an offer. The question is it going to be you as a real estate agent or is it going to be your competitors, right? So what they're looking for is the return on their investment, right? The primary motivation is, and their decision is the flow of the projections on their ROI, return on investment, right? And how it compares to alternative investments, right? So when thinking about working with an investors, that's really what they're looking. Quick money with an opportunity to obtain a tangible asset, such as real estate, to navigate an opportunity to help them to get this opportunity. Obviously, the risk involved, evaluating, right? Sometimes these investment properties are not good investments, right? So it's our job to really educate and guide. Most of the time, buyers who are investors already do their numbers. They already have in their mind what they're looking for, right? If it's a single family residence, if it's a duplex, triplex, fourplex, right? They're looking at it from a standpoint of opportunities to profit from it, right? So knowing the strategies and how to articulate the conversation will give you the upper advantage that you're going to be signing a buyer representation agreement with an investor, right? Because their number one priority is to find good properties that they can invest in and ultimately fix, make them pretty, and then put it back on the market with the hope that they make a profit on it, right? So the strategies, right? Right now, with the market being the way it is, right? Is it more of a buyer's market or is it more of a seller's market or is it a balanced market, right? Well, in essence, if you do your research, you're going to know that the market right now is a buyer's market. So what does that mean? That means that the buyers have an advantage over the sellers. And I hate to say it that way, but the truth of the matter is that they do. Right now, if properties are sitting on the market, right, the buyers are looking at opportunities. They can basically cherry pick and find the right property that meets their criteria, right? And that also goes with the regular consumer, right? They have options where before, when it was a seller's market, it was totally different. Seller's market, it was the upper advantage was the seller because there was less properties on the market and more qualified buyers to buy. So that's where we saw the frenzy of so many offers being made on one property, where now the property value was going up, 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 and up. The sellers had the upper advantage on this. Now it's the total opposite. Now the sellers are kind of in the mercy, right, of the buyers. So there is an opportunity for you to help navigate and get terms that are favorable to your clients, right? Because at the end, it's three elements to an opportunity, right? It's the price, the terms, and the condition that the property brings to the table, right? And most investors, through their eyes, they look at the ugliest, the smelliest, the more issues, the more excited they get. You would think, wait a minute, why would buyers want a property that's in really bad condition? It's because they have a vision of what they want to look on the future once they do the renovations on it, right? It's like restoring a classic vehicle, as an example, right? You find a great classic vehicle that is in really bad shape, but you have that vision to really bring it to life, right? Rehauling the engine, changing the brake systems, right? Paint and all of the elements to get it from what it was to what it could be, right? And the beautiful thing is, people will pay top dollars for something pretty. They will pay top dollars, and that goes the same with properties too. You'll see how many times have you been in your own personal neighborhood and you see a house that you've been driving for months and months and months or even years, that it's been sitting there with no one living in it, and all of a sudden someone buys it, and then you start seeing construction being done, right? Then you see the transformation of that house that was ugly to now coming to life and being beautiful, right? And then you see that sign, it's like, wow, the landscaping, right? The sod, the paint, the windows, the interior, right? The floors, the kitchen, the bathroom. They redid the plumbing, they added AC to it, they put a new roof, right? There's so many things that can make a property more attractive when it's completely renovated, right? So the essence of today's conversation and topic is going to be of how to work with investors, okay? And the importance in, as real estate agents, how you can secure those opportunities working with investors. Control is clarity, right? Investors demand transparency and communication, clear timelines, and complete documentations to make informative decision. Yeah, at the end of the day, it's no difference, right? But I can tell you from working with investors and being an investor myself, is I just want to get all of the ruffles off and just tell me if we have a deal or not, right? I don't want to sugarcoat it. I just want to know, if I submit an offer, are we going to be able to make this work? The beautiful thing too, folks, with working with an investors is a lot of the red tape is eliminated, right? Your traditional buyers typically need to go on a traditional avenue, right? Which is working with the lender and getting pre-approved, submitted tax returns, pay stubs, bank statements, and all of the fun things in order for you to qualify. Whereas investor, guess what? It could be a cash buyer, right? No contingencies, fast closings, and property sold in its as is condition, right? Those are the beautiful ones that you want to consistently be working with, is these individuals that see beyond everything else, right? And cut through all of the red tape. And then
Yes.
obviously the exit strategies, right? Every investor may utilize it in the future for a 1031 exchange or flip it or even hold it as a rental. Someone had a question?
Yeah, we're not seeing your screen.
Simon,
Yeah.
where's somebody's department or RE thing?
Okay. 1 second. Thank you. Let's see if this works now. Do you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Let's continue. So defining their buy box in front, right? Successful investors' relationships begin with precision before showing a single property. You must document their exact acquisition criteria, right? So working with an investor, what is their criteria? What are they looking for, right? And if you know how to navigate those conversations, it is easier for you to identify the properties that they're looking for, right? So you got to ask your questions. Are you asking a lot of questions, right? So if I'm going to be working with an investor, I need to know what their criteria is, right? Because I'm not going to go show a house that is $3 million if they don't have the means or the budget to go after a 3 million. I need to know exactly what their budget is, right? What do the numbers look like, right? What is it that you're looking for, right? Is it a single family? Is it a condo? Is it a townhome? Is it a multifamily home? There's many variables from an investor's point of view that you need to be asking the right questions, right? And that's where your thorough acknowledgement and sitting really down and understanding what they're looking for. What are their motivations? What are the trigger points that will trigger them for them to say, yes, let's go ahead and submit an offer. When you hear someone say, submit an offer, that's a good thing, right? But again, going to all of the elements that get you to that level is you got to ask the right questions, right? And when working with investors, sometimes they have this expression, right? No smile. They're just matter of fact. They're just looking for the right property, right? They're not here to be friends with you. They just want honest conversation and that you're looking at their best interest, but more so that you're finding those properties that they can submit offers, because their eyes is the end. They're looking at it from the back end, profitability. Okay. How do you distinguish a good property, right? And I get this question so many times is, what is a good property, right? Well, you have to look at it from the elements of what we call ARV. Okay. Does everyone know what ARV stands for? Okay. ARV stands for after repair value. After repair value. Okay. ARV is one of the most critical components to an investor's eye is, what can I sell this property after I fix it? What is the overall area selling for, right? Because if I buy it for this and the after repair value is this, there may not be enough margins for me to make a deal out of this. So it has to be from that perspective. An avenue is the lower they can buy it, the better their after repair and the more likelihood that they're going to make a profit, because there's a lot of elements and arithmetic in between what we call the front end of it. And I'll show the people on Zoom, if you can see the board,
Simon,
is, yes.
sorry to interrupt you. I don't know if it's too soon to ask this question, but where can we find these distressed properties?
Yeah, I'll answer that question in a minute.
Perfect, thank you.
So, okay, so when looking at an ARV, right, as a real estate agent, you got to look at what we call the front end, and also what we call the back end. Okay, the back end of a deal. The front end is what you can buy the property for at the worst condition, right? And then obviously the back end of a deal is once the investor has completely renovated the property and now it's a pretty home, what can he get on the back end after doing your calculations, right? So in essence, when you're looking at it from all angles is it's based on price, it's based on a target neighborhood, and is there opportunity for to be in an investment property as a rental, or is it more as a flip property, right? And flip properties is basically an investor buying the property, then turning around within 90 days, maybe 6 months, depending on how much renovations the property needs, will alter how fast that property. Remember, buyers who are investors are looking fast, streamlined process. They want to be in and out as quick as possible. And the reason they want to be quick and fast is because time of the essence. Okay, the longer they hold on to this real estate, the less money they're going to make, because every month there's what we call holding cost. Okay, holding cost is the element that investors don't like, right? And again, it depends if this deal is either a cash or a what we call a hard money. Okay, a hard money loan, kind of similar to a cash deal, but a hard money is still considered somewhat of a traditional finance involved. But a lot of it is red tape cut, right? They don't have to go through the elements like a general buyer, right? A hard money loan cuts through all of it. How they qualify is based on the property, not necessarily the individual. You may have crappy credit score, right? But you may have a property that has a good return, because in the eyes of a loan that is being utilized by a hard money loan, they look at the avenue of qualifying the property, because if you default on the loan, can they still sell this property to another investor that will be able to go in there and do what they need to do, so that way they can pull their money out, right? So a lot of the red tape when it comes to hard money loan is you don't have to provide, your tax returns. Yes, they'll still run a credit score on you to determine that you do have the credit worthy to be able to obtain a hard money loan, but you don't have to go through the traditional elements as most people do when they go buy their first home or a second investment or even a second home, right? They go the traditional way. Now, cash is always king, right? When you have cash, you have the reserves in your pocket. That eliminates a lot of the red tape, right? Because we can close as fast as you want. You can close in 3 days if you want to. Once you have the cash, you just put it in escrow and then have escrow do their jobs to get all of the paperwork for the exchange of transfer of ownership, right? And more so that you do a title search, right? To make sure that there is no liens or anything that will encumber your position. And now you have some type of title issue, right? That's why you want to make sure that the title is clear before you do the exchange of ownership. Okay. Oops, my bad. You guys see my screen? People on Zoom, you see the
Yes.
screen?
Yes,
we
it's
see it.
matching.
Yeah. All right. So mastering the core investor questions, right? And the credibility to really understand and how all this works, right? The projections of the NOI, right? The net operating income when calculating gross rental incomes too, right? So again, I'm giving you a perspective when you're working with different individuals that are investors, maybe investors that want not to flip the property, but are looking to really just generate cash flow. And if utilizing cash flow, what is the numbers that will make sense, right? Obviously, the more they put down, the smaller the mortgage, the more cash flow they're going to make, right? Because it's all based on numbers, right? But what if the margins are super, super tight as well? That may change the projections of a good investment from a bad investment. And I know I'll be the first one. Many, many years ago, I got into a property that I thought had potential, but at the end, it didn't give me a good return. And shame on me is because I thought, great, this is a great property that I can buy at a reasonable price. But the problem was I had really bad tenants. And the struggle with having bad tenants is if they're not paying their rent, you're not collecting any rental income. Someone still has to pay the mortgage on their home, and that's where the dilemma can alter your position. So you got to be very, very careful when working with investors that want rental income, right? And it's all based on what the property generates, right? More so when you look at the multiple listing service, right? One of the elements, if it's a good listing agent, they're going to put all of the financials on the MLS. So you get a good, concise understanding. Is this a good investment for my clients, right? Because it's based on the gross income plus net operating expenses that will get you the net necessary to see if it's a profitable a profitable property or not, right? In essence, the more you put down, okay, the better likelihood that your cap rate is going to be really good too, right? So when looking at that avenue, when navigating conversations with a potential investor that is looking to buy a multifamily with the intent of a cash flow, does the numbers make sense? So when looking at the MLS, you look at all of the elements. How many bedrooms is each and every unit, right? And let's just take, for example, that you pick up a 4-unit apartment complex, right? It's a 4-unit, okay? And it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath as an example, right? So if it's a 2-1, you should also be running comps on what? Yeah, you should also be doing comparables on the rent too, because most areas, especially in Los Angeles, guys, the rental income is very low for the area. So is there an opportunity to increase the rent or not? And if there isn't, like city of Los Angeles, you might be restricted. It may not be a good investment. Okay. Well, how do you make it a good investment? Well, you talk to the investor and says, the only way we can make this work is if you put a substantial amount of money, right? The bigger the down payment, the likelihood that this will become a good investment, even if the rental is low. It's all based on how much money you put into. The smaller the mortgage, the better investment it is. The less down payment that you put, then it's going to be very hard to really cash flow on a property, right? So you have to look at those elements as well when navigating investors that are working with you. Okay. Now, the path to forcing appreciation, you can add value through renovations, obviously, right? So let's just say that you're researching the MLS and you happen to find a good property that has 4 units, but 2 are vacant, right? And 2 are tenant occupied. Okay. Is there opportunity with that? 100%. Because now those 2 units, if they're in really bad condition, right, what can you do? Well, the owner can now renovate them, right? Put floors, put a new bathroom, renovate the kitchen, make it nice and fresh, because now what they can do is now raise the current rent, right? Let's just say that a 2-1 is renting for $1,800, right? Current, and you buy it with a tenant that has been there for 10 years and is renting it for $1,800. We're now 2 units, same amenities, a 2-1, right? 2-bedroom, 1-bath. Now you can rent it for $2,300 because it's current rent. Is that going to increase the cash flow to your investment? 100%. Because imagine if you had 2 vacant properties at $2,300. What's 2,300 times 2? 4,600. That's $4,600 on 2 units, whereas the other 2 units may be $1,800. You see how this can appreciate, right? So when looking at investments, are you looking at opportunities? Is it something that the seller might be able to navigate, right? And say, look, we can sell these units with no tenant in place. And better yet, what if these tenants are family members? There's opportunities that too. Everyone is going to be moving out, so you don't have the headache of dealing with tenants, right? So when it comes to multifamily investments, the best one, which is far and few, guys, is the ones that are vacant, right? There are not that many out there that are vacant. New construction may be another avenue, but new construction also means you're paying top dollars for it as well. Okay. So our rents below market, right? Below market rents represents immediate upside opportunity, right? There may be, right? You look at, and this is why you want to look at all of the financials, but more so is it on a month to month or on a lease? Because if it's on a month to month, well, the beautiful thing is the tenant can give a 30-day notice, or the owner can give, a notice that they're going to go in there and start renovating as well, depending again what area you're selling this property to, right? Because there's restrictions in certain cities, such as the city of Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles, as much as I love Los Angeles, there's a lot of restrictions for small investors to really be able to build opportunities with rentals. Okay. Look at what happened during COVID. A lot of small mom and pop investors were being crushed because, the state of California, the city of Los Angeles was giving tenant rights, and not allowing them to pay the rents. And it put a strain. Someone still had to pay the mortgage on the units. So you got to look at the pros and cons, right? Obviously, the more units that you can buy, the more income that comes in. And what I'm saying is anything more than 4 units, right? The more units, the more income that comes in.
Simon, I have
But
a
it also, yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Let's say the example that you just had. Let's say if the ones that are occupying the 2 units and the new buyer comes in, right? Can you raise the rent on those 2 units, or if it is rent control, you can, or what about if you want them to move because your family members are coming, are occupying those units? Can you do that?
So the answer is yes, yes, and no, and it depends. Okay. And I'll explain what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, let's say you're a real estate agent, right? And you happen to find a 4-unit apartment complex, right? And now when you're doing your due diligence, everything, and obviously is being proactive and having the conversations with the listing agent, as an example. You're going to ask the listing agent, tell me a little bit of the tenant situation, right? Are they on a lease or are they on a month-to-month? Because on a lease, we need to know when their lease expires, right? And your traditional lease is usually for 12 months. So if they just renew their lease, guess what? You're stuck with that tenant for at least 12 months. Does that make sense? Whereas if all of the tenants are month to month, well, that changes the conversation, because at any given time, that tenant can give a notice, and also we can give that notice. Again, certain restrictions, certain cities have rules and regulations about how that works. You cannot just tell a tenant that because you're selling the property, you want them to give possession of the unit. There has to be some type of exchange. Now you can ask, and most tenants may be willing to do so. But what if you have a very stern and stubborn tenant that says, nope, I got my rights? Okay. So that changes the conversation. You may now have to do some type of cash for keys, right? Or pay for relocation to make this work. And sometimes it can be as a couple $1,000s to more than that. I remember one of our agents at the office was negotiating cash for keys. And we started originally at 15,000. By the time we were going back and forth, the seller was, I'm done. I just want this tenant to be out so that way the buyer can buy this property and we can all win on this. He ended up giving the tenant $35,000 for relocation. And that's what it took for the tenant to vacate. Now, you can't force them to vacate, but you can say, look, in lieu of, I understand the inconvenience of us misplacing you from your current place, right? But in good faith, we're willing to give you some compensation for relocation, right? And some tenants may be okay with it. Some may say, no, you know what? It's just too darn expensive out there. So you got to look at the pros and cons, but this is why you want to educate yourself and really understand what you're getting yourself and more so what you're getting your clients into, right? When it comes to multifamily homes, right? Because there's always a win and there's wins in everything, but it's your way to navigate that, right? And again, going back is asking the right questions to the listing agent and saying, look, tell me a little bit more of the tenants, right? And who's going to know more than anyone is the owners, right? And the owner should be fully transparent with you if they're having issues. Unit A is good, unit B is good, unit C is good, but that unit D, we've been having issues. They're always constantly late. They're always complaining about issues with the property. We're constantly going out there to do repairs. Fair warning you, right? But they may be on a lease, and that lease may be for another 5-6 more months. Well, you got to look at that avenue when having the conversation with the buyer is, here's what we got going, and some investors are willing to tackle on tenants because they know how to work with tenants. You throw me a difficult tenant and I'll work with the tenant, okay? That's just who I am, right? And a lot of investors have that same mindset is, as stubborn as they are, let me at least have a conversation, right? Now, that's far and few, right? You as a buyer are not going to go in there and start talking to the tenants because you're not the owner of the property, but you also have to look at it from a point of view and a risk component. That's if you continue going forward, you close this deal, now the tenants is your responsibility, right? And for a lot of investors, they'll see it as an opportunity, right? Because again, there may be a number that may work for any of the tenants, right? We just got to know what that sweet number it is. I don't know. Is it 10,000? Is it 15,000? Is it 60,000? Who knows, right? But also the owner of the property has to look at it from a reasonable position too, as well, right? Just because they're saying $60,000 doesn't mean I have to, right? No, you know what? Thank you very much, but you stay in that unit and make sure you pay because there's other avenues in how you can force someone out of a unit, right? You guys all know that, right? What is one of them? Breaking of the lease, right? This is why when you're doing your due diligence, folks, when you're having these conversations and you're in escrow, you want to make sure that you're having the conversation with the listing agent to provide you with all the disclosures and all patterns, especially if this property is being managed by a property manager. Have the ability to be able to talk to the property manager to get a good sense and understanding of the history, right? Because it's like reading a book, right? You read it, you'll get an understanding and you'll get a trend, right? But one of the elements to be able to get someone out of is breach of the agreement, right? They're consistently late. You give a 3-day notice to pay or quit. Maybe they breached the agreement. Maybe there's only supposed to be 2 adults and 1 child, but there's 6 adults living in there, right? And and you can prove that there's people living in there, right? Well, that's an avenue for you to start the eviction process because they have breached the agreement, right? Maybe it was no pets when this agreement was originally done, and now there's 100 pets in there, right? Well, that's an avenue for ultimately to be able to exercise the rights of a landlord to be able to get someone out of a unit, right? And it all has to be ethical and it all has to be based on the agreements, right? Because if not, then you're going to be in breach, and that gives the tenant the ability to now hire an attorney, and now it can be so much worse, right? And now they're going to use all avenues of excuses. Now they can use that there is mold and fungus, and I'm having health issues. I've seen it and heard it all. So you got to be very careful in how you navigate this because it is a very sensitive situation. And there's attorneys out there that are ready, willing, and able to take on these cases because they know they're going to most likely win, or at least know that we're going to be in negotiations, right? And that's the thing with a lot of homeowners and their homeowners insurance is the adjusters don't want to take it to a trial by jury, even though the attorneys want to, because the more they can be involved in that, the more money that they make. So the adjusters are always wanting to settle. If we can just write a check and be done with it, we rather go in that direction, right? So you have to look at it from all perspectives when working with tenants and doing your due diligence, right? Because your due diligence is vital because you don't want your client to buy a property that now they're going to have some issues. Now, there's always going to be risk when any type of investment that you buy. If it's a flip property or if it's a multifamily, there's always going to be risk, right? And that's where you have to really educate your clients so they understand their position, right? Especially if they're not a very sophisticated investor, right? And they're leaning heavily on your position, that may be a burden on all of us, right? So you got to know how to really navigate every opportunity. Okay, let's see. We have a question.
Yes,
Yes,
I have a question.
Yes.
How I can protect my right if investor asked me to send him a lot of properties that he like, and then he go to buy it with someone else, another agent, or buy it by himself? Is there any way to protect your right for that?
Well, yes, the best way to protect yourself is having a buyer representation agreement. Because once you have a written, executed buyer representation agreement, and now this potential buyer or investor goes somewhere else, and we find out, well, we can go after breach of contract and ultimately have them pay your commission. So this is why it's vital and important that anytime you're working with any buyer, that you're doing a buyer consultation and you're really having them sign these agreements, because that's your security, that's your protection, that if this buyer investor goes left field on you and works with someone else, and then we find out, well, there's consequences and repercussions regarding that you have to know how to navigate it. And you also have those rights. This is why these forms are here created for us. It's not just for buyers and sellers, it's for the agents in general also to be protected. Because I know how tough, you put so much time, effort, and energy, and for someone just to go with another agent just doesn't resonate well, right? So I get it. But if you don't have a written agreement and it's within the time frame, right? Because an expired BRBC, it's not going to do justice. This is why we tell you that, the 3-month period and then any extensions, and there should be a provision that if it does cancel or expire, that you also give yourself that gap of time frame, because you just never know. That buyer or investor may go and submit an offer on the property that you negotiated and submit an offer. Your offer didn't get accepted, but now working with someone else, they may get their offer accepted. So you got to look at it from all perspective. Karina, you had a question?
But can I finish with that, please? But sometimes they
Yes.
don't like to, the investor, they don't like to do agreement. Just bring me stuff, and then after that, we will do the agreement. How you can do professional conversation with them to let them accept the agreement?
Okay, good question. So again, look, I completely understand that you want me to send properties to you, but I have no reinsurance. What if I do send you something and you go and work with another agent and then I'm out? I'm not going to put myself in that position. If you want my services, by all means, I'll give you 100% of my commitment that I'll find the right properties. But in order for me to have that, we have to have a mutual agreement. So therefore, if you're comfortable signing a buyer agreement with me, then by all means, I'll be more than happy to send you any properties that come my way. And if you're not comfortable, okay, I understand. Maybe I'm not the right agent. So you have to be okay with it. Remember, you don't have to work with any and all investors or buyers, right? You only want to work with people that want to work with you. So you got to look at from that avenue too as well. Does that make sense? I think she got signed off by accident. All right, Karina, question?
Are still bay cities and beach cities, all the cities around here under the same rent control because we're in the county of LA?
Yeah.
Or is it just city of LA?
It's well, most ordinance have their own rules and regulations because remember, we're in the ordinance of the state of California. So every individual city has their own ordinance on what that looks like. But when I always reference the city of Los Angeles because they're probably the most stringent and more restricted than any of them. You know, I have property in Los Angeles, and every year I have to pay what is it called? I just had to pay that bill, which is ridiculous that we have to pay for a license when it's an investment property. And it'll say, is it currently renting or is it vacant or are you living in it as a primary? So even if you own property in the city of Los Angeles, they don't know if you're using that as your primary home, as a vacant property, or as a rental. Every year you still got to sign either that form that you waive because your primary home or it's not being rented. But if you have it rented, then you got to pay fees, which is again due to the rent control and everything that's going on with that. So
What is the correct source to go to for like each one of our little individual cities? So
Yeah. Yeah.
different situations.
Yeah. Good question, Karina. So the best way is go to the city's website and then go to the housing department if they have any. And then that's where you'll be able to know what are the rules and regulations and restrictions for that specific city. And if they don't have, because most cities don't, then you can just call their general and ask the question, hey, is there a department that handles, you know, what the rent control is or anything regarding rents or tenants, rules and regulations? Because some have where there's fees you have to pay, like the city of Los Angeles as an example.
There's like some cities are charter cities.
Mhm.
It's a whole different, you know.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. City of Alameda. Okay, it's City of Alameda is its own city, but they also incorporate into the county of Los Angeles, which is not the city of Los Angeles, it's the county, right? How do you distinguish that? Is look at the agency that patrols or the fire department, right? Big indicator. If you see LAPD, City of Los Angeles, if you see LA County Sheriffs, county, right? Alameda is sheriffs, so LA County Sheriffs. So the jurisdiction would be LA County, which is totally different. Yes, it's still the county of Los Angeles, but it's not the city of Los Angeles.
They may have noticed.
Yeah, exactly. Look at Torrance as an example. Torrance runs their own. They have the Torrance Police Department. Redondo, they have their own Redondo Police Department. What else? Manhattan has their own agency, right? So they're their own city. So you can check their city website to see any further information regarding rents and all that. Okay. Yeah, perfect. Identifying hidden investment opportunities. The best investment deals rarely appear in the perfect in the MLS, right? Train yourself to recognize and indicate motivated sellers. These opportunities often sit longer on the market, right? So again, looking at it, depending, right? I believe that the best deals are the ones that are not on the MLS. Okay. Those are the best deals, especially if you're working with a seller directly. Working with the seller directly, you cut the middleman, right? You cut the agent, you cut the commissions involved. You're working directly with the seller. Those are the best one, right? Because you're negotiating with the principal, not a middleman, such as a real estate agent, right? So to me, those are the best. Now, with that being said, the MLS is a very powerful tool, which we also, you know, have the privilege to utilize as part of our arsenal of tools, right? We need the MLS because once we sell a property, we need 100,000 agents to be looking at your property. So that way they have the right buyer that's going to submit an offer on your property. So it's a catch-22, right? There's pros and cons to having the multiple listing service, which we need as real estate agents, but more so if you're looking at it from your perspective as an investor, the best deals are the ones directly with the seller, right? But not to say that, you know, the MLS doesn't have great opportunities, because I bought properties on the MLS as well, and most investors do so as well, right? But you got to look again at the after repair value, right? And how do you determine and evaluate the after repair value? And how do you know if it's an offer that makes sense, right? Well, you got to look at the margins. When sitting with a buyer investor, right? You got to ask the investor, Well, tell me a little bit more of your financial position. Are we going all cash or are we going with hard money, right? Because if they say, well, we're doing an FHA, that's not an investor, okay? But if they say we're going all cash, right? And let's just say for the sake of argument, okay, that you find a property, okay? You find a property that is 500,000, okay? But you know that that area, right? That area is going for 850. Okay. There's a property, and this is an SFR, single family residence, right? And it's a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet on an average 6,000 lot, right? But it's a junker. It's in really bad condition, and they're offering on the MLS for 500,000, right? But you know that that particular property in the same neighborhood, right? Properties are going for 850. Okay. 3 bedrooms, 2-bath, on average 1,500. Okay. Would this be considered a good property based on these numbers? 500, 850. What is the difference between 500 and 850? It's 350,000, right? Is the profitability, right? That's the margin, right? That if you can get this property to sell for 850, that's a potential of a $350,000 profit. Now, you got to do what's called reverse engineering, right? Because investors are looking at it, yeah, that number sounds really, really good. But in order for me to get 850 or more, I got to make this property look similar to what properties are selling for, right? Now, the challenge here is you're not the only one that sees this, right? So you're dealing with other possible investors too that are looking at this. And that may raise from 500 to 525 to 550 to 575, right? Then it may be, where is it still good margins for me to submit an offer, or should I just back out? Okay. Now, investors know, right? But now let's just say, let's take the $350,000 potential profit, and we're going to do reverse engineering, right? Now, when the investor, when you show this property is, they're going to look at the overall condition. What does the property need, right? Most investors already know what it's going to need. What? It's going to need floors. It's going to need kitchen, bathroom. Does it need plumbing? Does it have foundation issues where we need to raise a certain areas? Because I've seen properties too where you're walking kind of sideways because it's kind of leaning and sinking, and you may have to go underneath to what do they call it? Jack it up to level it off, or put plywood to even it out. I've seen where plywood is put where there's a certain 2x4s to even it out, right? To make it even. All of those you have to take into consideration. Does it need roof? Does it need windows? Okay. Do we need to add square footage, right? Maybe it's a 3-1 and that's selling for 850. But if you add an additional bathroom, now you see more potential. Where homes that are 3-1 are probably selling for 675, right? And adding a second bathroom might give you the dividends to get you around 850. How much is it going to cost you to do an additional bathroom? So these are things that you have to look at it. Now, not that you need to know all of this, right? This is why they hire a contractor for estimates, right? Most contractors will know, depending on the square footage of the home, right, will dictate how much it would cost, because there's labor and material. And right now, the cost of material is off the chains. Labor is very expensive right now. I don't know what it is in California, but it's just crazy expensive. So you got to be very conservative when running these numbers, right? So let's just say, theoretically speaking, that this investor can do all of the renovations for 150,000. Okay, just rough estimate. Okay, so let's say that he bought it for 500,000. He puts in 150,000. Is this still considered a good investment or not? Okay, well, let's do the reverse engineering now, right? Because you got in at 500,000, you're now 150,000 in renovations. So let's do the math. Now you subtract that because this obviously, right, is coming out of your profit for the time being, right, on the front end, with the goal to ultimately, make a deal. But let's just say that it took you $150,000 to renovate this property, right? So that's going into your profit because it's going to take some money in order for you to make it pretty enough to sell it for a higher. The goal is obviously to sell it at 850 or more, right? And if you're lucky, right, you might have the most beautiful property in the neighborhood that you got multiple offers on it that they're willing to pay even more than 850. Maybe you get 875 or even 900,000, right? Because you've done such an amazing job, or your investor, right? So when running numbers, the investor and the contractor will determine, well, it's going to cost me $150,000 to renovate it. It's still a good margin of profitability on this, okay? Because there's still money to be made. And if the contractor can get it done in 90 days or less, right, that's even good, because time of the essence. The more critical and the faster they can get this from beginning to end, the faster they can put this property on the market. That's what an investor wants. Because if they go 6 months to a year, they're now going into their profit. Because remember, it's not just about these numbers. There's front-end cost, and there's cost during, and there's cost after. So there's 3 costs involved, right? To acquire this property, there's expenses. There's cost and holding costs, right? Especially if you have a hard money loan. Okay. And let's just say you don't have a hard money loan, but you now have $150,000 of your money tied into this property for the renovations. So you're out. That's a risk, because if you cannot sell it to at least break even or profit, you might lose money. And a lot of investors lose money. You got to be careful, especially if you're not a sophisticated investor. You're just kind of trying it out. And you think because it's an ugly house, you're going to make money. Because I can tell you from personal experience that even 150,000 can go quick. And if you did not budget for it, and I've done it multiple times where I always go over budget. This is why I give myself a cushion, because I know I'm going to be over the little here, the little there. The contractor doing other jobs, and there's delays. We don't finish it within 90 days. There's so many things that can happen that 150 can be 175, 185. Shoot, maybe 200,000. Remember, all this is going into your profit now, on top of the holding costs, right? That doesn't even take away if you have a hard money loan. Every month there's mortgage payments that need to be paid. So those are even more pressing, that the investor wants to get this off their books ASAP. That's why you hire a great contractor to give you tight numbers, and not to be too conservative. They got to give you solid numbers that you can now make a sound decision if 500,000 is the number, or if we have to offer, say, 480 instead. Okay, because you may need an additional 20,000, so we need to reduce it from 5 to 480,000, because I need that extra 20,000 to make these numbers work. Okay. But see, that's where you come in as a real estate agent, is how to invest in opportunities. Okay. Highlight days on market. Properties linger suggests sellers' motivation. Yeah, the longer a property is on the market, the more flexible they are to take something less than 500,000. If a property's on the market for 5 days, okay, you think you're going to get a discount? Probably not. But if the property has been on the market for 50 days, right, they may be more flexible to say, look, we haven't had any offers within the last 49 days. We need to sell this property. Yeah, we're willing to take less than that. Okay. And you got to be okay with it too. I've submitted offers sight unseen, never looked at the property. Okay. I just went with the gut feeling in the area and I just threw an offer. And I've been able to get properties that way. Okay. I don't recommend it. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do because you want the property. And you can see on the far end, which is your after repair value, right? Your ARV, there's potential. Remember, there's conditions, right? If you're tying up the property for your investor, the investor has their due diligence. Maybe they're reducing their time period to release from your traditional 17 days to maybe 8 days or 7 days. So you better get your people out there, right? And when having a conversation with the investor is, do you have your crew ready, your contractor to go there to do all their inspections so they can give you, the necessary bid? Because if they don't give you a bid, every day that we're not getting this done, the likelihood either you're going to, the seller's going to cancel on you, or you may lose your deposit, depending on what your position is. Because sometimes you're going in with as is, and you're releasing loan, you're releasing appraisal, and sometimes the physical inspection may be very, very tight that you have 3 to 5 to 6 days or 10 days. So remember, you got to be on top of it as a real estate agent because you're protecting your buyer's earnest deposit. Okay. So you got to look at it from all perspectives and elements to it. All right, let's continue. Off market, direct outreach, absentee owners, code enforcement violation, record. All of this stuff you could probably get with your title company. Your title rep might be able to provide you with absentee list of owners. Absentee means properties that are not primary homes to them. It may be a second home, a vacation home, a rental, or it's just been sitting there. Title companies can provide you with the list of absentee owners. Also, they can provide you with any code enforcements, right? Because they have information with the cities too. Maybe it was red tag, right? City of Los Angeles does a lot of red tagging. Eviction court calendars, right? Evictions too. They just may be tired of having it as a rental, and they may be in a position that they just want out of this and not have it as an investment anymore. Expiring cancellations, right? Again, it's pretty common, right? Look at all these opportunities. Professional network, right? General contractors, inspector, property managers with frustrating owners, appraisals, distressed properties. And this goes back to your question. Where do you find distress, right? What is distress? Huh? What is it?
Property that has a problem by foreclosure.
Yeah, basically a distressed property is the property is either in default, right? When you miss your first mortgage, they'll send you a courtesy letter saying, hey, you're late, please make sure you pay your mortgage. On the second late, they'll send you a second warning and says, hey, please make sure to call us for arrangements. Are you in a financial situation that maybe we can help? If not, by the third month of non-payment of your mortgage, then what happens is they'll do what's called a NOD, notice of default. That gets recorded in the county recorders and now starts the foreclosure process. So that's a distressed property because if the seller does not do anything, that property is going to eventually be sold in auction under a trustee sale. So our job is to find and navigate. All of that information is on the MLS. You can go through the categories or criterias on the MLS, and there's categories for distressed properties, notice of default, trustee sales, REOs, real estate owned properties, HUD homes, all of those are part of the MLS. Okay. If you do your little bit of research, there's videos on the MLS that'll show you the categories and the criterias to find these particular properties that are advertised on the MLS. So going back to your question, Claudia, everything is on categories or criterias on the MLS. And if you want, give me a call later. I can help you navigate where you can find all of that information.
Thank you, Simon.
You're welcome. All right, let's continue. All right, the 5-minute underwriting framework, right? Again, just kind of understand, asking the right questions, right? When it comes to evaluating an investment property such as a multifamily, or even investment portfolios too, right? And it's our job, right, to kind of understand and learn the basic stuff, right? Not necessarily that you have to be the expert, but have a good understanding, right, when working with an investor, what they're looking for, right? An investor that's looking for a flip property, the first thing they're going to want is, does it make sense? Am I going to make money? Because if I'm not going to make money, then it's a waste of each other's time. I want a property that makes sense to me, right? Am I going to be able to make a profit? The faster I can get this property in and out, completely renovated, the more likelihood that I'll get, as close as much as possible on the profit based, again, what I can sell it for. Because remember, you buy it for this and you sell it for this, but there's in the between, right? There's expenses and stuff that needs to happen in order for it to make it look pretty. Because don't think that you're going to be able to buy it for 500, right? And then put it on the market as soon as you record it for 850 on the same condition you bought it for. No one is going to pay for an ugly house because they're going to do the research. Is, wait a minute, you bought it for 500,000 and now you're selling for 850. What improvements you did? Right? No improvements. Then it's going to be very likely that you're going to get any value to it. So
Simon,
that's why you have to. Yes.
is possible if you can do pictures before and after and you show it to the customer after, or is not right? Like
What do you mean?
sometimes the buyer said, oh, you bought this house from like 3 months ago and now you bought 350 extra. So you wanna win, like you wanna get profit 350 extra in 3 months. So it's possible if you show him the pictures of the house before and picture of the house like he see after, but you can't show him the picture of the house before, like when the house was ugly and you renovated
Of course.
like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Remember, it's only common sense. You saw and the MLS is going to have history, right? And how you can check the history is you just go back and see the address, and it's going to tell you if this property has ever been on the market in the past. You can go back as long as there's agents have listed the property. You can go to all of the history of that specific property. And yeah, to answer your question, if you see a property, again, what's the likelihood that they're going to buy and sell it and not do any repairs, right? That's not going to happen. The whole intent is for this investor to buy it, fix it, then sell it for a profit. Okay. But I wanted to show you the avenues and how to work with investors that are flippers and then also investors that are buying cash flow properties, right? Because the level of conversation is no emotions. They're not in the emotional game. They're just looking at how can I make money? Okay. It's a portfolio, right? It's like I say, look, invest in this stock, right? And the stock will give you a 80% margin in profit, right? All I need from you is $10,000 to invest, and then within 12 months, you're going to see a good return on that money that you invested, right? Well, it's the same element when you think of it from a stock mutual fund calculations. Real estate is no difference, right? Because the beautiful thing about real estate is the appreciation. What you can buy it, right? Because what you buy today is not going to be the same 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Look at the trend. I wish that when I got into real estate back in the mid 90s, I was able to buy more real estate in the 90s because I know that property value then is not the same property value now. Okay. I bought back in the 90s, you could buy property for under 200,000 in certain areas. 200,000 that now areas are going for 8 to 900,000 or more, right? Imagine if you bought in the 70s and 80s. My neighbor to my right bought the property in 1975. 1975. He bought his property. He told me he bought the property for $85,000. Okay. That home is over $1 million something now. Imagine that, right? I was just a baby in the 70s, so I couldn't afford to buy it. But think about the area that you work on, right? Redondo, Hermosa, Manhattan, the Valley. You know, there's opportunity, right? You got to be bird dogs out there, right? Going out there and just looking and finding and reaching out to the owners. You know, go out and look at a beautiful neighborhood that has an ugly house and go door knock it, you know, and just say, hey, I have investors that are willing to buy your property in its as-is condition and eliminate a lot of the red tape if you're interested in selling, right? You got to ask. Okay. A lot of them will say no, I don't plan to sell, right? But some may be at that point where they may say, yeah, you know what, I think it's time. Okay. It may be that time where they are willing to sell. Strategies investor offer offer construction. Winning investors offer aren't about highest price, they're about certain professional and removing seller friction. Understand what sellers truly value allows you to structure offers that win against high price competition, right? Certainty on closing, speed and efficiency, similar clear terms, tenant respect, clean communication. Remember, motivation is the pillar to everything, right? And if they are motivated, then it makes it a whole lot easy for them to want to sell. But it also goes into terms, right? Because think about it. You have a certain number that if someone comes up to you and says, I'm willing to offer you this number, and if that number is a sweet number, you'll probably sell your property. And all of us have that number, right? Let's just say you bought your property for 900,000 and you bought it a year ago and someone says, look, I want to give you $2.5 million cash deal. We can close in 10 days less. Okay. I don't think I'll make that in 20 years from now. I'll sell it to you, right? There's a number for everything. Maybe there's an intention on why they want this property, right? And I've seen situation is because they own all of the other houses and they need your house to build a massive multi-family $10, $15 million project. And they need your property and they're willing to pay big bucks for it. You just never know, folks. But there's a number that all of us will say yes to, okay? Maybe some will say, no, look, I'm just going to be here or pass it on to my children, right? And that's perfectly fine. Then you move on to the next one. Okay. Hope that all makes sense. Hope I'm just spinning my wheels up here. All right, so let's dive into the agreements, right? Seller documents, deadlines, right? Part of what we do, right? Especially when working with investors, you're not going to prolong this for 60, 90 days, right? Most of your buyers who are investors want in and out as fast as possible because they want to be able to start making profit, right? So this is why cash deals are beautiful or hard money lenders are great because we can close in 15 or less, right? We don't have to prolong this because they don't need to go into all of this emotional roller coaster like your typical buyer does. They already know. They already have a sense of what they want to do with this property. And some would just say, look, just get the offer accepted and let's do this. Because they're going to tear down or gut the entire house. They can care less of what the condition. If there's most, so what? We're going to replace the plumbing, which is going to take care of the leak underneath the house. There's a gas leak. Okay, who cares? We're going to replace the gas line, right? The foundation, the windows, whatever the case may be. Someone says, I don't care. Everything is going to be brand spanking new. So we're going to gut it out and start from scratch. So they're okay. Most investors are not afraid of the condition of the property where most consumers are. Okay. And this is why you get people that get cold feet, buyer's remorse, because they see it from a bigger perspective as this is going to cost me more money. And I get it. But investors are different type of individuals because they have the capital to make something from being ugly to pretty, or an investment, right? Because they can see the big vision is eventually they're going to be able to now renovate each unit and now bring it up to current market rent. I'll share one of my personal experience. One of my first investment, I was sharing it with Lawrence about my first property was an apartment complex in the city of Ontario. I bought it as an FHA, 3%, 3.5%. And at the time, they were still giving 3% commissions. So I was able to convince my broker to allow me to use my commission towards the down payment. And I asked the seller to pay for closing costs. At the time, it was probably 1.8%. Well, I basically went in with really no money down, and I was able to buy a 4-unit apartment complex in the city of Ontario. And the beautiful thing, it was a 2-bedroom, two bath condo style apartment complex. The complex was built in the 1960s, but the rents at the time were $750 because the owner had them for about 40 years or 30 years, something like that. So he just wanted, he was okay with that. He didn't never increase the rent because he was still getting cash flow because he bought it for a lot less. And guess what? I bought those apartment complex for $375,000. $375,000, and I kicked myself in the rear because I ended up selling them in 2006. When the property value went up, I ended up selling them. Biggest mistake of mine, and I regret it to this day. Because the last time I sold it, I saw it get sold. It was sold for I think it was 1.4, 1.5 million. Maybe about 2-3 years ago. That's like, that could have been cash flow right there. That could have been free and clear. And then the rent now because by the time I sold them, I think I was charging $850 or $875 per unit. But I lived in one, so 3 of the other units was paying the mortgage payment. And I sacrificed, wasn't the most desirable area, but you know what my mortgage payment was? Like $800 or if that, I don't remember. You know, because the other tenants were paying my mortgage. Win-win. But when I saw like there was 2 neighbors down that they sold, and they sold it for almost 3 times what I ended up buying it, I says, I gotta sell. I should have never sold them. That would have been one of, like I told you, Lawrence, you keep your first one out of regret. You always want to keep that one and keep it for the rest of your life as an investment, because that's your piggy bank. That's going to be your cash flow when you're ready to retire. That's the beautiful thing about it, because I bought them for $375 and now they're worth more. And guess what? 10, 20 years, they're probably going to be worth even more. And guess what? The rent keeps continuing going up.
Yeah.
So that's the beautiful thing, that the legacy that you can leave your family, right, is a running machine. I see rentals like a vending machine. As long as you take care of the repairs and all of this, it's like a vending machine, right? You don't have to be there 24/7. Every month, you're going to be doing the happy dance, right? Because of the rental income that comes in it. Yes, of course, you got to pay insurance. Yes, of course, there's going to be repairs. Yes, of course, you got to do fumigations. Yes, of course, you got to pay taxes. But imagine when the mortgage is completely paid off. The spread of the cash flow that can now supplement to be able to buy another property, right? Or pull a line of credit or refinance to buy another property, or do a 1031 exchange from a 4-unit to an 8-unit to a 16-unit, right? the sky's the limit into, multifamily. So again, you got to look at it from all avenues. But it starts with the research and it starts with your understanding and how to navigate this. And believe me, working with investors can be a challenge, but it also can be very rewarding as well. If you find the right investor. And I think the last slide, building your investor machine, right? So as I mentioned, right, the beautiful thing is you will be the superhero, right? When you find properties, because they're going to go after you and consistently be reaching out. Do you have any properties? Because they know that you're on the forefront of those conversations trying to find deals for your investors. But remember this too, and I'll leave it at this, and I apologize if I went over my time, but I wanted to give you kind of a scope of what this looks like. Remember, great deals can also be great deals for yourself, and you should also be a little selfish. So think about this for a minute, right? If you find a great property and you have the ability to do so, keep it. We're in an industry that allows you to do so, right? You're helping other people build legacy and wealth, right? You should also be considering yourself and building wealth too. Yeah. And there's times like the last project, I thought for sure I was going to sell it, but I fell in love with the home and I decided to move into it and rent my other property. Just didn't think I was going to go in that direction, but I did. But now I'm looking at, once I stay here to now get pivot and look for the next. You should always be looking at always buying 1 or 2 deals every year if you could. That's the beautiful thing is just keep growing your portfolio. Okay. And if 2 deals is too much, try to buy 1 deal. And if it's not every year, every other year, make a habit and an ability to buy 1 investment portfolio to either rent it as a rental or fix it to sell it for a profit. Okay. We're in an industry that allows you those opportunities if you're out there really understanding how to do this, because a lot of real estate agents don't. Okay. This is why education is vital and very important. With that, any final thoughts, questions, or concerns? I hope this
Hi,
was of
Simon.
somewhat value.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I just have a couple questions coming from a different side. So I'm the listing
Yes.
agent and I receive an offer from an investor. So here's what I wanted to ask. What are they showing? Like I got an offer in an LLC name. They gave proof of funds in someone's name, not an LLC, like probably a husband and wife. As the entity seller, they didn't fill out anything about a trust, just put one person's name and just a scribble on everything. That doesn't tell me anything, right? It doesn't tell me how is he the entity, who's this money? I don't have anything. What would be the right thing to be giving with an offer from an LLC?
Okay, so one of the things, and that's a very good question, Christine. Thank you. So when you receive an offer from an LLC, I would do a little bit of due diligence, right, and do a little bit of investigation. Go to the state and do some research and find out, because a lot of LLCs are not, and again, not that it's your job. Escrow and title will ultimately do their research, because if it's an inactive LLC, then that LLC will have to be reinstated, right? If it's deactivated or it's been canceled. So it may not be a good LLC. And that may be also a trigger that they may be wholesaling it. They're using that LLC as a decoy with the intent to not buy it, but ultimately wholesale it to someone else. And that's another topic and conversation when it comes to wholesaling, right? And Christina and I have been involved in these wholesalers, and they can be a pain in the rear. So that's one of the elements.
Brutal.
Yeah. So the essence,
Okay,
do
yeah.
your
So
due
that's part of my
diligence.
thought about this.
Yes. Is
Okay. Also,
do your,
what you were saying earlier about, about cash deals and they could be shortened. So no loan, no appraisal. 21-day, 2-day inspection and they left all the other things, the insurance, all the other things at default at 17. So that's not also a very good competitive offer.
Yeah, it really isn't, because they're using other avenues. And this is what I call pretty savvy investors that are using that as a loophole, right? They'll not necessarily manipulate, but make you think, oh, we're releasing X, Y, and Z, but then they have other avenues in how they can exit their this transaction and ultimately waste everyone's time. So when you're actually
Right.
doing your counters, is you want to make sure that you're tight on those conditions, and that includes any and all contingencies, right? And more so, as part of the agreement too, is that you provide the contingency removal, and that the buyer releases, because that's your receipt, that's your proof that the buyer has released that as part of the condition. Just because they say it on the contract doesn't necessarily mean it's done, because in the eyes of a litigation, they're going to say, yeah, we put it in writing, but it was never executed as per the agreement. The agreement says that the buyer shall release this utilizing the contingency removal, right? And then that's going to be your proof
Right.
and your receipt. Here it is. So you want to make sure that when
Yeah.
you're negotiating these type of terms, that you look at every element of it, because one little error, mistake can alter your position and now drag it for a long time, or with the intent that this buyer may be able to back out of the deal and retain their deposit. Now, I don't,
Right. This
I'm
for
not,
me, this one did give the contingency removal, but I'm savvy too on it, and I caught all those other things, and it was a blind offer, so I have it all handled. But I just want to say like that, what should I be getting? Because that the entity thing and the seller name, I get what you're saying about the CalBiz. I had looked up on there, but it's hard to say. How does that identify the person that's the person in an offer?
that's true. Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
true. Well, and that's really up to escrow and title to do their research. And we always go with the intent that whoever's submitting an offer is the actual person, right? And our job is to really navigate and get the offer in escrow, right? And then all of the next steps would be the escrow officer and the title company to do their research. And obviously, when they do their statement of information and their escrow instruction, a lot of the information is, driver's license, social security, identification of all that nature, right? And then they run it through their systems to make sure that this individual, like for me, every time I have to, there's a fraud alert. So I have to call the escrow officer. Yes, this is my social security, this is my date of birth, but that goes because I have a fraud alert on my credit bureaus through all three of them as just a layer of protection. So I want to make sure that if anyone is utilizing my social security, that they call me so they can say, is this you? And if it's not me, then they can, stop it from being, a debt on my credit, right? So just layers of protection, and that's where a good escrow officer and title company will do justice for you. Yeah. Anything else? Does that answer your
Thanks.
question?
Thanks, Simon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes our class. Thanks, everyone. I really appreciate everyone. Have a safe Friday and a safe weekend, and I'll see you on the next contract class. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.